You're listening to a punk movie review right here on the Prairie Punk Press Network.
Could a venue like the Outhouse exist in Brooklyn, New York? No. Could it exist in Manhattan? Could it exist in downtown Washington, D.C. or Boston, Massachusetts? No, 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 and no.
Hi everyone, welcome to the first episode of a punk movie review. The movie for this week is the Outhouse documentary. The actual official title is The Outhouse, the Film, 1985 to 1997. It's directed by a guy named Brad Norman, and it was released in 2017. Brad Norman, I could not find any other credits for him on IMDb or anywhere else, so I can assume that this was a passion project of his. And he was must have been somebody who was part of the scene who just wanted to make sure this got made. He doesn't appear to be like an aspiring filmmaker or anything like that. As usual, I'm Neckbone.
Hi, I'm Jerbear, and today I saw a Cybertruck, and I wanted to smash it.
I still have never seen one in the wild, but man, there are a fuckload of Teslas in my city.
Yeah, Brad Norman, from what I recall, is a Kansas City punk. He died a couple of years ago. But when I was volunteering for the Tallgrass Film Festival, we had some communication back and forth to try and get it to Wichita for the film fest, and that's where I actually saw it for the first time, was screening it for that.
Interesting. Yeah, I had never seen it before Monday.
Okay, so you're coming in fresh.
I am. I felt like I should have been drinking heavily while watching it. It just gave me such a nostalgia kick, but instead of drinking heavily, I did have a glass of moderately priced Cabernet to celebrate.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow, you're a fucking poser.
I know, right?
I watched it on my laptop while my wife was watching that Netflix show about people. Love is Blind or something like that, where they don't get to see people.
Oh
and
yeah,
my wife they're going to propose.
Yeah, my wife watched that
watching
entire
that
thing
while I was watching the Outhouse documentary and taking notes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who's more of a poser. I think it's you still.
Were you tempted to look over at her screen and see if love was indeed blind?
I mean, I looked over occasionally and laughed heartily at how silly the show is. But yeah.
Yeah, it's ludicrous.
Yeah. I mean, I was hoping to see more disappointment on the faces of the people when they saw each other for the first time. Mm-hmm. But they all seemed pretty stoked.
Yeah.
But, we're not here to review bad reality TV. We're here to talk about the punk rock documentary of the Outhouse. So
yeah, so
let's do that.
What is your initial thought? And ours are probably going to be different because you'd actually seen it before. But what is your out the gate? What's the first thing you want to say about it? What's your first thought?
So, I had more of a fondness for it before watching it last night. I remembered it more fondly. And also, I tried really hard to pay attention to pictures and who was showing up in the documentary, and I could only recognize a few faces. Jeff Fortier, he was around some. I didn't really interact with him a ton, but he was around parties and bars and stuff. And Ilya, he was around, and I don't remember if he was at the Central House or what. I don't remember where he was around. But I remember his mannerisms and his cadence in the way that he talks. And then I was like, man, that guy's super familiar, and looked him up. And yeah, I hung out around him a couple different times, and that was pretty funny to see. And then Rico, the Sharp, everybody in Kansas City probably knows Rico. It was cool to see him. He was always a nice guy. And then, I wish there would have been more focus on local bands, I guess.
Yeah.
That was kind of a disappointment watching it again, was the lack of the local scene. I mean, they talked about some of the 80s punk bands that helped establish the Outhouse as a place to go, but not really a whole lot.
Right. Yeah, I noticed that it was all, although it was pretty incredible that he got all the people that he got to be in the documentary. I would have liked to have seen some of the local bands, or at least have them talk about some of the local bands. Like some of the closest ones, I remember they mentioned Naked Ray Gun was from Chicago. That's about the closest they actually got to a band that's at least from the Midwest. And I was a little surprised because I went to the Outhouse 2 times. I was still living in Wichita, and only one of those times I actually went inside. The second time, I, no kidding, sat on my friend's car in the parking lot. We could still hear the band, and we just sat on my friend's car and drank, because it was way easier to piss into the cornfields when you're already outside. And I want to say I saw the Vindictives there, but maybe I didn't. I might have seen them in downtown Lawrence, and I might have seen someone else. But my God, the first time I went there was the time I went inside, and it's a blur. I mean, I was. I pre-gamed. I'm pretty sure I stayed the night at Jeff Stein's house that night, because he was actually living in Lawrence at the time. And I don't remember if he went with us or not. So, Jeff, if you're listening, let me know if you went to that show with us. And if you did, let me know who the fuck was playing, because I think it was the Vindictives, but I could be wrong. And at the time, I didn't realize how legendary the Outhouse was. It was just a place that was in the middle of nowhere that we went to watch a show. For me, not that weird of a thing, because we did that in Wichita too. Like, I don't know if you did, but I know I went to a barn party out in Mays. I went to similar like middle of nowhere. Somebody's, parents or grandparents just had a bunch of land, and they would just have a party out like in Augusta. So going out to the middle of nowhere to go watch a punk band play was not out of the norm for
strange.
Me. Yeah. So I didn't think anything of it.
Yeah, I was. The other thing that struck me is how I missed out on it, because I never went to the Outhouse, and especially like the later in the 90s when they were having more bands that I gave a shit about. I mean, Logical Nonsense played there, Dopa played there, Grimple played there, like so many bands that I still absolutely love played there, and I missed out on all of that, so that's kind of a bummer. But I still got to see lots of cool shows.
Yeah, that's right. There's no shortage of seeing shows, especially in we saw plenty in Kansas City, but I think I personally saw more in Lawrence, probably because I could walk to every venue right, that was downtown from our house. So it made it really easy to just see a show and then walk home. My initial thought on the documentary was, especially when I saw the runtime, I thought, this is too long. Like, it's obviously a passion project of somebody, and obviously I'm going to guess that the director also edited it. And when he was cutting it together, I'm guessing. And I know that, when you're cutting your own stuff, it is tough to cut shit out. But that was my initial thought, was it's too long. It's kind of too disjointed. Like, you see, like, Fishbone is one of the first bands who actually talks in the documentary. They're also one of the last bands who talks in the documentary. So there was no, like, you know, it's all from the same interview. So there's no, like, real cohesion. Like, where's it going?
Yeah.
Same with Ian MacKaye. He's kind of just peppered all over that documentary. Although he's peppered all over every punk documentary. So that's not
wearing
surprising.
the same red beanie.
Right. I think
Every
that
time.
somebody just recorded like 12 hours of interviews with him. They just kind of pepper it and disperse it throughout punk rock documentaries, is my guess.
Yeah.
Ian, if you listen to our podcast and there's any truth to that, please reach out to us and let us know if that is in fact the case. Yeah, so that was my initial thought, my initial reaction. Though it was, and you touched on this too, it was a great nostalgia trip. It was a great walk down memory lane for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was for me too, because I knew about the Outhouse and the local connection. If I had no connection to Kansas or an alternative music scene, I wouldn't have given a shit about the documentary. I don't think it has wide appeal. I think it has, I think it appeals to people who are into punk or alternative music and people that went to the Outhouse.
Yeah, I agree. And I was thinking about that. It actually makes me think of our main podcast. I was like, yeah, this is for a niche audience. Just like our main podcast. If you were a punk in this, you know, in the Midwest, especially like the Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska area in the 80s, 90s, and maybe even early 2000s, you'll probably dig this because it's a walk down memory lane. But if you were anyone else, unless you're just infinitely fascinated by the fact that there is a punk scene in a place like Kansas, which I do, a lot of people that I've encountered in my travels and my living in various other places, their minds are blown when they find out that there are punks in Kansas.
Yeah.
But it's not going to have a lot of appeal to, like your standard big city punk. It's just not.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, we can get into this later, but I mean, you already mentioned the runtime. You know, if you don't care about this, it's over 2 hours. That's a lot for a documentary.
So that's kind of our initial reactions to it. I'd like to kind of talk about the filmmaking techniques, and as we mentioned, the guy who made this film was not a filmmaker, so I don't want to try to hold him to the same standards that I would hold someone who like went to college for film or who has experience working on films at any capacity. But there are definitely some critiques to be made, I think. Do you have any that spring to mind?
I mean, it's a standard talking head documentary. You know, it's you get people who have stories about the scene or whatever. You put them in front of a camera. The audience doesn't hear you ask the questions. You see the interviewees answer questions, and so you know, you get their discussion about it, and then, you know, it's intercut with photos, film footage, performances, things like that. I do wish that there had been more on-screen information about some of the performances. They showed a lot of pictures of bands, but there was no citations about who it was or anything like that. So, you know, I mean, there were some, but it wasn't consistent. And I just wish there could have been more, you know, information and citation about some of what I was seeing on the screen. Just because I'm curious and interested. I mean, I don't think it negatively affects the experience of watching it, but I would, I personally would like to know who some of the people were that I was seeing, mostly in like pictures, but there's some performances also where there's no citation about who it was.
Yeah.
So that would have been nice, and some editing.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And some of the photos and stuff, like I recognized the band just because I recognized them.
Yeah.
But yeah, like if I didn't know who they were, then I'd be sitting there wondering, like, who the fuck is that, and why do I care?
Yeah, like there's one that I was really curious about. I'm like 95% sure it was SNFU and Mr. Cheapig dancing around the stage straight toward like first 15 minutes or something. He's got blonde dreadlocks and he's jumping around like a maniac, and I'm pretty sure it's SNFU, but there's no citation on there for me to know that. So I mean, my best guess is that it was SNFU.
Yeah,
could have been somebody else. I don't know.
Yeah. And
I did like all the flyers because I love flyer art, and there was so many flyers.
And in some of the interviews, and I'm not sure where he interviewed some of the patrons that he obviously interviewed locally. I liked that they had the background for them was a bunch of Outhouse flyers too, on the wall behind them. I thought it was like, that's what you want to have their background. And I realized for some of the more famous interviews, he probably had less control. And I'm sure that they just did it over, Zoom, Teams, or whatever the fuck was popular in 2017. It's 2016 or whenever he did the interviews.
Probably Skype.
Skype, sure. But yeah, a lot of those interviews, from a technical aspect, they were framed poorly. Some of the audio was not great. It wasn't consistent at all. And once again, like he's not a filmmaker, so it kind of seems like the documentary was set up more like it was put together by an archivist as opposed to a filmmaker, and that's fine. Like and like we said, if you're part of that niche market who enjoys it, maybe that's all you want to see, is just bands you like talking about when they played that shitty little shack that was outside of the town you lived in. I got a little nostalgia trip from that. So for me, that was enough. But yeah, the framing, there were some weird, odd editing choices, and he wasn't consistent with the voiceover, because there wasn't like a narrative, but every once in a while he'd jump in and do a voiceover. I assume it was him. It was somebody.
It was not. I looked it up because I was like, this narrator is completely fucking disinterested. And I was listening to it for a second. I was like, wait a minute, is this fucking Iggy Pop? Because Iggy Pop does like narration for punk rock documentaries. So I was like, maybe this is one of the ones that he did, because it sounded vaguely familiar. I looked it up. I don't know who the guy is, but he sounded completely disinterested. And that could just be, how he is. It's not a diss on it, Well,
and some people just aren't, if they're not used to doing voiceover work, some people, even when they get a microphone in front of them, they just begin to speak like this because they don't really, it's just, it sounds like disinterest, but it could be that it's just somebody, it might have just been one of his buddies or something. It's just like, hey, I just need you to record this shit for me. Just read this script, and But yeah, it was kind of intermittently through the documentary, but not really consistent, and it filled a couple of gaps that needed to be filled. Speaking of filling gaps, that's our thing. So don't style bite us from 6-7 years ago.
Before we started.
Way before we started. But retroactively, we own that now. Going back through all time. But anyway, yeah, it was just kind of, all I could think was like either do voiceover or don't do voiceover, but don't do this weird in between random voiceover just kind of when it's convenient. Yeah, there was no narrative set up. The band interviews were just all over the place, and didn't really tell a story. There seemed to be like some kind of chronological order, I guess.
I don't think there was.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there vaguely was, and certainly the storytelling aspect went in chronological order, but I don't think the interviews did.
Right. Yeah, when they talked to
like
the promoters,
Fishbone.
yeah.
When they talked to Fishbone, they were just talking to Fishbone.
Right.
It was not a chronological focus. It was just like, hey, talk about the Outhouse. And
right.
They talked about the Outhouse, you know.
That is,
same with Ice-T.
Yes. Ice-T, who
except
is...
for...
If I was not convinced Ice-T was a total cop, I definitely am now.
Oh my god, yeah, what a freaking baby.
I know. I would have called the cops on him. Like, what? You fucking played there, Ice. What the fuck are you talking about? More than once,
whining,
I think.
He was whining so much about shit. Like,
yeah.
But, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
There was a brief, like, point to the chronology that Ice-T had, and it was talking about a specific show and when he banged his head, but except with the exception of that brief story, everything else he talked about was just about the Outhouse. It wasn't a chronological importance. So I mean, stuff like that, that's while interesting, it could have been cut, and it could have shit like that could have, you know, dropped 30 minutes out of it and made it a proper documentary length.
Right. In an interesting way to cut some of that stuff together, because some of these stories of, you know, city punks coming out to the middle of nowhere could have been, you know, you cut between them, and the different aspects of it, of being like Fishbone being a black band from LA, and you're suddenly in a cornfield in Kansas surrounded by white guys with shaved heads. Like, that's interesting. Like, yes, that's that I want to hear that story. I want to. Well,
and you could build tension that way, because you know, like, oh, what's going to happen? You know, nothing. Everything's cool, but you know, you could build tension, create I don't know, more interest.
I was afraid of the white people.
They got your black ass way out in the middle of the cornfield. That's where it all goes down.
Oh no, white people can do anything they want to us out here.
Right. Yeah. But I did like that we got to hear the perspective of, you know, LA punks and New York punks and DC punks, you know, who are, you know, usually because they're making their way across the country, and that's just the, you know, between going from coast to coast, it just was a place that they stopped. But yeah, that's one aspect, and yeah, you can build tension by meshing some of those stories together. The different aspects of it, the different aspect of being, you know, like a white band from DC versus a black band from LA, or, you know, and then, you know, in different parts of the documentary have more of the local people. Like, we didn't hear from anybody who kind of would have our perspective of like, yeah, I didn't think anything of it, man. It was a fucking punk venue in the middle of the nowhere. That's how I grew up.
Right.
Like, that's Kansas.
Yeah. I mean, you know, Dave Brocky's story about getting fucked over was great.
Yeah.
That was a high point for sure. You know, Henry Rollins always does a good job in these things. He's done a million, just like Ian MacKaye.
Yeah.
You know, Ian MacKaye, you know, he was super funny. Talking about I forgot his fucking name.
The guy with the shotgun. Yep.
Yeah.
As we pull up, there's Tad shooting a 12-gauge shotgun and blowing up fireworks. They were just going crazy. But just the fact that you pull up and there's this guy blowing off a shotgun, that was already interesting.
You know, that shit was funny. Good storytelling there. You know, and yeah. So, I mean, it's not a bad documentary. It's just,
Right.
there's some areas where it could have been better. That's all.
And I hate to use the word like amateurish, but I mean, yeah, like it was.
It's a DIY documentary about a DIY punk rock venue.
Right,
so,
right.
it is what it is. And,
Right.
I wouldn't expect much more.
Yeah.
Or less.
Right. If you're looking for a super slick, documentary about punk rock, this isn't it. This is a punk documentary about a punk thing, and it's made in a very punk way. It's just somebody.
It's not.
It's DIY.
It's not fucking Ken Burns.
Right.
Speaking of Ken Burns,
Mm-hmm.
I really want somebody to make a documentary about Ken Burns' hair. Because it's so terrible. And it's always been terrible.
It has, yeah.
Like, how does that happen? I would like to see a documentary about Ken Burns' hair.
I don't know. He might be from a planet like how Vulcans all have that same shitty haircut. Like he might be from a planet where all of his people have that shitty haircut. Maybe I don't know.
Bowl cut, but just up front.
Whole planet of people with hair like that who love jazz and baseball. That's the whole fucking planet, monocultural planet. I found it kind of interesting too to see bands that you wouldn't normally think of would play at a punk venue. I guess Gwar has played at a lot of punk venues, and I think I've seen them at a punk venue, but I would not describe them as a punk band. Same with the Meat Puppets. Just kind of like, oh, okay, the Meat Puppets played there. It's an interesting choice. I have nothing against the Meat Puppets, but
they're like college rock to me.
Yeah.
And Gwar is just Gwar. I mean,
right.
They're as punk as they are metal, as they are performance art. I mean, the ethos is, to me, seems very punk rock. I mean, a bunch of D&D nerds who love metal decide to like make up space alien characters and play metal. And they did it totally DIY.
Yeah.
That's punk as fuck to me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I would not describe their music as punk, but yeah. I mean, there's their performance art definitely has a punk aesthetic to it. So I guess, it makes sense that they play in punk venues along with the Meat Puppets and Ice-T.
It's funny how precious he was about dude with the shotgun, and he's got two dudes with shotguns on stage as body, with body count. Like,
right. A guy who was in a band called Body Count, who made a song called Cop Killer, is squeamish around the Kansas punks and talking about how he would call the cops if he lived around there. So
yeah. I mean, also, like, he's not wrong. Those farmers. I mean,
yeah,
I kind of feel bad for him.
I do.
But
Yeah, I had sympathy for the farmers. I did. Like, people coming and knocking on your door in the middle of the night and being like, "Can you give me a ride home?"
Yeah. That's fucked up, man.
What the fuck are you?
Punk rockers are mostly harmless.
Yeah, that's true. For the most part.
For the most part.
Yeah, maybe not the Republican punks, but
no.
Yeah.
Nobody was in any real danger. Like, they weren't gonna rape their kids or anything. They're just punk rockers getting wasted, listening to music and having fun. Punks get a little rambunctious.
Yeah, for sure. I was glad to see that its popularity got boosted by KJHK Lawrence, Student Run Radio out of Lawrence, Kansas, University of Kansas. And I think you already know this about me, Jerry Bear, but I was a DJ at 90.7 KJHK Lawrence.
That was after I left.
That was after you left.
I got to hear your radio show.
I was a DJ there for 2 years. And I got my start there on the Jazz in the Morning show. And I got that gig by lying about knowing anything about jazz. So one of my buddies told me they had an opening. And he was like, it's Jazz in the Morning. And the station manager would want to talk to you. And I was like, oh, okay. The station manager was like, so do you know anything about jazz? And I was like, oh yeah, man, I know. I love jazz. Like I listen to jazz almost nonstop. That was a complete lie. And
Did you just keep saying jazz?
I did, and I'm so glad he didn't press me. I don't think he knew anything about jazz, so that helped. So, like,
Nice.
because if he would have pressed me and been like, name your top favorite jazz musicians, I'd have been like, Louis Armstrong and a couple others. Who else is? Louis Armstrong is the one I can think about.
Just say Miles Davis and you'll be fine.
Right, Miles Davis, Charlie Parker, Louis Armstrong. There we go. Can I get the job now? But I didn't know shit about jazz, and I winged my first year there was nothing but jazz in the morning. And my shift started at 5, which for a punk rocker, that's 5 a.m., by the way. That is 5 a.m.
Dude.
And so for a punk rocker, showing up anywhere at 5 a.m., unless you've been up drinking up until 5 a.m., is just a fucking almost impossibility.
I lost the first job that I got when I moved to Lawrence. I lost because I couldn't get to work at 6 a.m. On a Saturday morning because I lived at a punk house, and on Friday night everyone was up until 3 being loud. Yeah, and I had the job for 3 Saturdays. So the first Saturday, I went to bed at 1 and was able to get up to my alarm. I got there by 6. The second Saturday, I was up until 2. And I didn't get there until 7:30, and then the next week again was real bad, and I didn't get there until like 7. Yeah. And they fired me that morning, but I was too still drunk from the night before to realize that they'd fired me. So I worked my whole shift and showed up on Monday, and they were like, "What are you doing here?" It's like, "Coming to work." They're like, "No, you got fired. You don't work here anymore." I was like, "Oh, okay."
So that meant you had the day off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Quick story about Kansas City when I worked at the video store. I worked at this little video store called Video Mania, and my roommate Ray, who is now Dr. Ray, needed.
Ray.
He's
TV star Dr. Ray.
Yeah, he's an animal doctor. I think they called them veterinarians.
No, but I mean, on the TV show he was on, he was Dr. Ray.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Human doctors can only operate on one animal, and veterinarians have to operate on a fuck ton of animals. So,
yeah,
which one's more talented? I don't know.
Right?
You tell me.
I mean, I would trust Ray to pull a bullet out of me.
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
That's why people go to animal doctors to get like illegal bullets taken out of them.
We are animals, so I mean, he could probably help. I'll keep him in mind.
Oh, Ray, I hope you hear this.
So
I miss
anyway,
you, buddy.
He needed a job, and we were hiring at the video store. But the video store manager wanted to talk to him, and it was like, my shift started at 4 p.m., which is a good time for your shift to start, unlike 5 a.m. 4 p.m. is nice. And so my manager said, okay, well, when you come in at 4, I usually leave, so I need your friend Ray to come in with you so I can talk to him right before I go. So he needs to be there at 4 p.m. And Ray never got the job because he couldn't make it to the video store, which, by the way, we lived half a block from the video. Half a fucking block. It was no kidding. Like, if I put my Walkman headphones on, which, yes, at the time it was still a Walkman, I had a tape and everything in there, I couldn't get through one song before I was at work already. And he couldn't make it at 4 p.m. to talk to my manager. So my manager's just like, yeah, I'm going to hire somebody else. I was like, okay, that makes sense.
Sounds about right.
Very reasonable.
Times.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, 5 a.m. for my jazz show. And then the next year, I didn't do jazz anymore after that. I was on the freeform hour, so I would work like late nights, which was way better. And if anyone from KJHK is listening to this, I absolutely was not drinking on the air, I promise, for my night shift where I'd play a bunch of punk rock. And I swear no curse words ever made it through on air. That I wasn't keeping my fingers crossed for years. Like, fuck, I hope nobody reported that. It's like a $15,000 fine per word or something like that. But yeah, no, I was very careful. But fortunately for the jazz show, They had just gotten internet in the booth, and so they had a little computer in there, and I, no kidding, was Googling jazz musicians. I would find a record, and I'd be like, oh, this sounds like an interesting name, and I'd just sit there and Google jazz musicians, and then, like, find their records, and be like, and then I'd get on and be like, yeah, like, next up is Charlie Parker with, I can't even remember a song of his, with the, Kansas City Shuffle or whatever. Like, just some shit I had just looked up like 5 fucking seconds earlier. And I'm talking about it like I'm a fucking expert. I made a whole year running that show, and nobody noticed. Or if they did, they were nice enough to not report me.
They probably couldn't find anybody else to work at 5 in the fucking morning, to be honest.
It's a bunch of college students.
This dumbass is willing to be here at 5, so we'll give him a fucking show.
And it was unpaid.
Whatever.
It was unpaid work at 5 in the morning, but I just really wanted to be on the fucking radio. So it's like, all right, yeah, I'll fucking do it. I'll run a jazz show at 5 a.m. for no money. Sounds awesome.
How many days a week?
I did that 3 days a week. Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Oh, man.
Yeah. It sucks. Yeah, it sucks. Especially because Friday I'd get up and I'd be there at like 5 a.m. And then Friday night I would inevitably drink until 5 a.m. So I've been up for 24 straight hours. Yeah. So and then I still had my job at the pizza place because, I had to make money and pay rent. So I had to have my money job. See, this is what happens when you watch a documentary about stuff in Lawrence is you start reminiscing.
Talking about Lawrence.
Yeah. So if that was this documentary's intent, then, well done. Well done, Brad Norman. You want to talk about William S. Burroughs? You can take that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool that he went out there. Burroughs lived in Lawrence for the last, decade or so of his life. Mm-hmm. Used to go out there and shoot guns. When we lived in Lawrence, I don't know if you went to any of the parties at his house. I mean, he was dead, but what's his name? Gowerholtz?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? James?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
He used to have parties there, and we would go. He did have like pool parties and shit.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a couple of those. That was cool. It was cool to see Burroughs. I was a big fan. When we lived in Kansas City, I got a ride back to Wichita and couldn't find anybody. I didn't have a car at the time. I couldn't find anybody, so I went to the Riverside Perk and sat there and waited, pre-cell phone. So I left a note on Aaron or Sean's door. I don't remember which one. And it was like, hey, I'm in town. Come find me at the Perk. I sat at the Perk for 8 hours and read Naked Lunch in one sitting. And I was not well afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Just sitting there drinking cup after cup after cup of coffee. I smoked probably a pack and a half of cigarettes and read that fucking book in one sitting and felt ill afterwards.
Yeah, for sure. I think I read that book in high school, maybe just after high school. Did you ever see that weird movie adaptation? Yeah.
The Cronenberg movie, right?
Yeah.
And it was very Cronenberg.
It fucking was, yeah.
The other thing that I laughed at in the movie is the lace code. I don't think that lace codes are important anymore. Mm-hmm. If you don't know, listeners, if you don't know what that is, that means the color and way you lace up your boots shows your affiliation with different skinhead cultures. So, sharps, traditional skins, Nazi skins. They talked about that a little bit, and when they're talking about cutting their laces off, it's because they had a shitty lace code or didn't know what they were doing, and either were a Nazi or a dumbass, so they cut their laces off and stole their boots, because that's what you did to Nazis back then. And again, that's when in that part of the documentary, that's when Rico was being interviewed about, standing up against the racist skinheads that used to go out there. Again, I didn't have any experiences with racist skinheads in Lawrence or Kansas City, mostly because people like Rico had already taken care of them by the time we moved up there.
I didn't have any problems with any Nazis or racist skins. I don't remember even seeing any in Lawrence. I don't think I saw a single one at any show, unless I just didn't recognize them or something.
No.
The closest bad run-in I had was with the Punks. So for anyone who doesn't know, the Punks, that's what we shorten it to, but they're Republican punks.
Which is contradiction terms.
Doesn't make any sense, but like, I rebel by licking the boot. Okay. Sure. But yeah, they're Republican punks, and I was at a show for some local band. I don't remember which one. And I was wearing a Screeching Weasel t-shirt. I was a big fan of Screeching Weasel at the time. This girl walked up to me. I was single at the time, and she was cute. And she was like, "Hey, you like Screeching Weasel?" And I was like, "Yeah." She was like, "Yeah, I like Screeching Weasel a lot too. Hey, you want to come back to my place with me and my friends, and we'll put on some Screeching Weasel and drink?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Sounds fucking great." We went back. They had some some upstairs apartment. It was off of like Tennessee and like 13th or 15th in Tennessee, somewhere around there.
Oh, wow.
Somewhere in what we in Lawrence called the student ghetto.
Yeah,
Near the university. It was, a cheap neighborhood that students and punks and stuff lived in. And I went up there. What's that?
I'm just trying to think. Tennessee, if you go south of 14th, that's all frat houses.
Yes.
But maybe that's just on the west side of the street. I guess on the east side of the street it was
apartments.
Still.
Yeah, apartments and houses.
So yeah, I'm just trying to work out in my head where like 15th.
I remember it was
there'd be frat
pretty
houses
close to the corner. It was like only a few houses down from like 15th and Tennessee. It was directly across from the frat houses. And I remember that because I was delivering pizza. At the time I had a job delivering pizza, so I knew all the frat and sorority houses. I delivered to those places a lot, and they don't tip well.
Weird.
Shocker. But yeah, so I'm up there and I'm like drinking. They're giving me beer and stuff. And they're like, "Hey, you want to see our guns?" And I was like, not really. And they started bringing out guns and shit and talking about that. I started looking around. They've got like, like lots of like American flag stuff and lots of like super patriotic kind of kitschy stuff just all around the house. And I started to feel really uncomfortable. They're like showing me like their shotguns and stuff like that. And I was just kind of like, I forget what excuse I made. I think I was like, "Oh man, yeah, I fucking forgot. I got to go pick up my roommate or something like that." Who I think was you at the time. So it's like, "Yeah, man, I got to go pick up my roommate." I
never hung out with them.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that you didn't use me as an excuse. I never hung out with them that I remember. Were they fucking Okies?
They might have been. I don't remember if they said where they were from originally. But yeah, like I hightailed it the fuck out of there. I was just like, I gotta.
That's fucking lame. I mean, I don't have any problems with gun ownership or whatever, but like, why do you gotta fucking brag about it and pull that shit out around people that are drinking and stuff? Like, there's it's just weird.
We're sitting around.
It's a weird thing to do.
Right, we're sitting around drinking and listening to music. This is not the time to pull a firearm out. And same. I don't have an issue with responsible gun ownership. I actually am personally trained on multiple firearms, but I would never pull a firearm out while I'm drinking and entertaining people. That is just
fucking weird.
Yeah, it's just weird. And it was like an intimidation tactic, I think. I think it was like them trying to gauge kind of who I was and like wondering if maybe cool I could be another like Republipunk to join them.
It's because of that Screeching Weasel shirt.
I know. Yeah. I know. I have had weird people talk to me. I used to have a Screeching Weasel shirt. I used to have a Vandal shirt. And every time I wore either of those, like the weirdest fucking people would talk to me.
The other thing that I thought was funny is in the 80s, I think that was chronologically when they were talking about the cops, jokingly suggested an ammonium nitrate bomb.
Yes.
There was actually a police officer that jokingly said, "I don't need to tell you how to make an ammonium nitrate bomb, do I?" And And this was before Oklahoma City.
Right.
And then, of course. And then later the sheriff was like, they stayed out of town, you know. There's
Yeah. Right.
maybe it was in the 90s when Lawrence cops became more chill to townies or whatever, but I would like the whole time we lived there, the cops were pretty fucking chill with us, and I mean, they would shake their head at us and the nonsense that we got up to, but very rarely did we ever get in any trouble.
I still have beef.
Antics.
I have beef with the Lawrence PD because I'm not kidding. There was a party literally across the street from our house on Kentucky, and I forgot, like, I needed to go grab something from our house, and there was no traffic out. There was just, the street was fucking empty.
I remember that.
Yeah, across the street I had an open beer, but I was literally walking across the street, and a cop rolled up on me because I was off of private property for a brief minute, and I got a drinking open container. It was like an open container ticket. That when you get an open container ticket, you have to go to court for that. Like, you have to show up in court. So I had to.
That's so fucking weird because, like, I forgot all about that. But usually they were fucking chill and didn't give a shit. I mean, must have been some fucking cowboy who had a shitty day or something.
Probably.
To pick on you.
Well, I remember Joe told me once that he slapped a cop in front of the Pirate House, and literally nothing happened to him. Well, he told the cop that he'd had a fly on his face or something like that.
Yeah. Somebody punched the windshield of a cop car and busted it and didn't get in trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, if they tried to arrest anybody that night, there probably would have been a riot because they were hugely outnumbered. That was the Element show on my birthday party when the whole block became a party. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, what the fuck were they gonna do? But when they rolled up on me, I was by myself. They caught me by myself, and that's why they knew they could get away with. They're like, hey, one of them just left the group. Let's pick him off. You know, fucking cops.
Yeah. The dude on the motorcycle seemed like a real fucking creep.
Yeah.
And gross. Seemed like a really skeezy fucking dude.
I don't want to make any assumptions about him, but it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if I found out that he still cruises for college freshmen.
Look, I'm just saying, he looks like he listens to that Ted Nugent song about, like, 17-year-olds.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, real big fan of Kiss's Christine 16, too.
Ugh.
Which I can't wait to hear 70-year-olds singing about a 16-year-old.
Was that Winger had a song about?
Yeah.
She's only 17.
She's only 17, yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's old enough for me. That's
old
the lyrics.
enough for me.
Yeah. Yeah, they wrote that
Yeah,
as adults. That was not a song they wrote in high school.
Didn't Kip Winger die?
I don't know, actually.
His name is Kip.
Yeah. Kip Winger. It just sounds like a made-up name.
I'm looking it up.
Okay. Yeah, can we get confirmation on this Kip Winger?
Nah, he's
death?
still alive. Wow.
Okay.
I hope he still plays that song.
I saw them at
I was thinking of Janie Lane from Warrant. He's the one who died.
Oh, okay. No, I saw Winger at, I want to say it was a Riverfest in Wichita. It was something in Wichita.
Probably.
Some kind of fest.
No. I bet it was Osfest.
Yes. Ozfest, not to be confused with Ozzy Osbourne's Ozfest. Ozfest in Wichita
as in Kansas.
Yeah, as in Land of Oz, as in Dorothy and shit. Yeah, so let's go to give me 3 positives and 3 negatives.
All right. So, my favorite thing in the documentary was the cut between the promoter Dave and he says, he's talking about like the conflict with the Bad Brains about performing because the dude was in the hospital. The PA guy was in the hospital, and Dave was trying to explain the conversation, and he's like, well, have you ever talk to HR, and it immediately cuts to HR just saying the most outlandish shit ever. Like, I don't even know what kind of fucking tangent he was on. It was fucking hilarious. That was the best cut of the whole fucking movie, was that. I mean, it didn't even miss a beat. It was the perfect edit for that film. So that's my number one positive, my favorite thing probably in the movie. And then, Dave Brocky's story about getting fucked over by the other promoter. I can't remember his name. It's really bothering me, but whatever. And then, the brief, like, last 10 or 15 minutes where they played the Black Label song and talked about the late 90s before it shut down.
Yeah.
I got goosebumps hearing Black Label and seeing flyers of all my friends' bands.
I agree. I'm going to agree with you on that's one of my positives too, is seeing the flyers on the screen. I thought that was really good, and the editing was actually good for that. And I can imagine like how many different like clips that he had to put in there. I mean, that's an arduous job to put that many flyers moving that quickly. And I thought that was a nice touch that he did that. And I don't know where he got all those flyers from, but I'm glad he got them.
I think they were probably his. I mean, it did it 3 or 4 different times, and there was probably, I would guess probably 30 flyers per time.
Yeah, for sure.
He did that.
Another positive for me was, I found it interesting. Part of the thing that I really enjoyed about it was the nostalgia trip. And getting to see bands that I liked, the national bands that I grew up liking and that helped me discover punk, talking about a shitty little venue that I had been to before in the middle of nowhere in a cornfield in Kansas, was really fucking cool, and bringing back a lot of memories for me of going to punk shows in places like that. And just the sheer chaos. I do think overall he did a good job capturing, kind of just the chaos. I mean, the documentary itself was pretty chaotic. So he did a good job capturing the chaos because of that. And I think he also, another positive for me was showing the uniqueness of Kansas punks in general. I think that the Plains states have the most unique punk scene I have ever seen. To me, it was just normal growing up. It was the only scene I'd ever known. But after traveling, I would even say that the New York and East Coast scene in general is closer to the London and British scene in general than either of them are to Great Plains punks. Like, I think they're so much, like, New York and London have more in common than either of them do with a place like Kansas. And seeing, there is this kind of weird, and it can lean right or lean left, depending on who you talk to, but there is this weird kind of libertarian attitude that a lot of Great Plains punks have of, like, we're out in the middle of nowhere. We're going to fire off fireworks. We've got guns out here. We're shooting shit and we're, drinking. It is, to me, that was not an odd thing to see.
Henry Rollins describing how it couldn't happen in New York. It couldn't happen in LA. It couldn't happen in Chicago. It could only happen in the Great Plains, basically.
Yeah.
There were outhouses all over the Midwest, I'm sure. Different names, but, just clubs in the middle of nowhere, tiny DIY venues.
And I don't know if you agree with this or not, but I do feel like Kansas and Great Plains punks, a lot of people don't think of this, but maybe a little bit tougher than some of the city punks, even though city punks have their own. We've both read plenty of biographies and stuff from punk bands that have been through some shit, who are from cities and the coast, but also, when you're in the cities, you are mostly surrounded by people who are afraid of you because you're a punk. When you're in a place like Kansas, you're surrounded by people who are not afraid to pull a gun on you, who hate you,
Right.
just for having a mohawk and looking like a quote unquote freak. And
Yeah.
they're violent. Like the reactions that I used to get when I had a mohawk were violent for me existing,
Oh,
for me walking down
for
the
sure,
street,
man.
minding my own fucking business.
So, a lot of normies, for lack of a better word, that I know, are afraid of predominantly minority neighborhoods.
Yeah,
They feel uncomfortable there. I don't.
right,
Because when you're a poor punk rocker, that's where you live.
right.
And people in those neighborhoods,
Mm-hmm.
as long as you don't fuck with them, they're not going to fuck with you. They don't care.
Right.
They don't care that you're weird. It doesn't matter to them because they got their own shit they're worried about. But you got out in the country in rural areas and you have weird hair, you have weird clothes, like they're afraid of you, and that fear comes out as anger and violence. Like I was way more afraid of rural Kansas than I was any of the quote unquote bad neighborhoods in either Wichita or Kansas City.
Yeah, for sure.
I remember when we were making a lot of trips back and forth from Kansas City, we'd stop in Cassidy, and every time we stopped there, I was afraid.
Yeah, the prairie
because
chicken capital of the world.
Yeah. I didn't know what was going to fucking happen at that gas station.
Right.
And, I have been threatened by people like that before. So, you react to what has been a threat to you. And to most punk rockers, I would say, at least in Kansas, it's the rural areas where you were in more danger than in any kind of urban area at all.
Right. Even some of the smaller East Coast towns and West Coast towns that I've lived in. I lived in Norfolk, Virginia, which is not a big city by any stretch of the imagination. It's about 150,000 people. It's about the size of Topeka. I never felt I was in danger there, even when I was, I didn't have a mohawk anymore, but, I still wore like punk band t-shirts and would hang out with punk rockers, and, we'd be out late at night and stuff. Like no one really even gave a fuck that we were out doing stuff. And part of that could be too, because, I was older, maybe people fuck with you less when you're older. I don't know. But I never felt as in danger in a place like Norfolk, Virginia, as I did in Wichita, Kansas, Topeka, Kansas, Manhattan, Kansas, Hutchinson, Kansas, all those places. Just, I always felt like there was a small element of danger around every corner.
By scared white people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
The other part of that, with large metropolitan areas and punk scenes there, is this was the 90s and early 2000s. It was pre-internet, and people in big metropolitan areas didn't have to work as hard to find punk rockers and alternative scenes because it was so much more present there. We didn't have cool record stores in Wichita, really. We didn't have we didn't have CGs, we didn't have Gilman, we didn't have, a lot of the resources that larger cities had, so it was more difficult for us to find people, find music, and find a scene. And once we did find it, it became that much more special and important to us. So that's why the scene was tighter.
More I would say the scene was more artistically and musically diverse too, because like you go to the mall and you're wearing a band t-shirt, it doesn't matter if you see a kid in a fucking Sonic Youth t-shirt. It doesn't matter that they're not a punk band. You're like, oh hey, you listen to something that a lot of people don't listen to. We should probably
Right.
fucking hang out. Like,
Right.
it's a beggars can't be choosers. You just see somebody wearing a T-shirt of something that's like even adjacent to the scene, and you're like, cool, we're friends now. Oh yeah, give me some negatives. Give me 3 negatives.
The length, man.
Yeah.
It's too long.
Mm-hmm.
And middling in places. Just like a lot of that shit didn't need to be in there. You know, in editing.
Yeah.
It's just I know I imagine it's hard to make some cuts, but good God, did this movie need some fucking cuts. And you know, I mentioned earlier the narration was kind of dull. You know, and also, you know, citations. I would like to see more citations on screen for, you know, I already mentioned that, but that's really, I feel like it needed more. And also what I mentioned earlier is it need more local bands in it. I mean, the Outhouse wouldn't have survived as long as it did without local support and local bands.
Right.
You know, I mean, where's the Esoteric? I mean, they got really big. They played there.
Yeah.
Derailer. The Embarrassment from Wichita. I'm sure they played there a lot. I saw a flyer with the Embarrassment on there. I mean, I just feel like there's more they could have done as far as local bands. I think it would have been, but you know, maybe that's just catering to Kansas people. I don't know.
Yeah.
If they wanted more broad appeal, I can understand going with focusing mostly on national acts, but it's disappointing. I didn't get to see more of my friends.
Would have liked, I agree. Would have liked to have seen more local people other than just patrons. It was cool that they interviewed some of the patrons. I'll say that like, okay, yeah, that was a good thing to put in there. But yeah, I agree. The length, it was way too long. There was no real narrative happening. It was just kind of interviews crammed together with a voiceover every once in a while. So I think that, it probably, I'll probably get to this in the next section, but yeah, it would have benefited from somebody who maybe had more experience editing. And just some of the basic things like the framing for the interviews was kind of all over the place. A lot of people just in the middle of the screen with like way too much space above their heads and stuff like that. Just stuff that just kind of like, I was just kind of like, could you just, you know, put some effort into the framing of your interviewees. Like, and I get it, this wasn't a filmmaker, so there's just stuff that they just don't know. So I'll go right into the next thing then, which is, you know, how are you going to make it better? Well, I already just said mine. I would have, and I know it was DIY, so there's probably no budget, but I would have found somebody in the scene. This is 2017, so this is when the documentary was made. Tons of punk kids now have Adobe software and know what they're fucking doing with it. I would have asked for some help. I would have put some feelers out and been like, hey man, I'm trying, you know, making this movie, this documentary about the Outhouse. I have no money. I'm making it. This is a passion project. So anyone else who feels strongly about this, please, you know, help me edit it, or at least give me some tips to edit. Or if you want to do the editing yourself, I'll give you the credit as the editor. You know, I don't know, something like that. I think I would have tried to have found somebody who kind of knew what they were doing in the editing bay. That's how I'd make it better. How would you make it better?
I would cut the Melvins out.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know why they were even there. They didn't push anything forward chronologically, and they just kind of told stories. I don't know. I mean, similar to Fishbone, but Fishbone was more interesting. You know, more charismatic, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, they had a unique perspective too, more than the Melvins did. Yeah.
I don't know why they were there other than just to name drop them, maybe. I don't know.
Probably.
It seemed weird, and, you know, instead of them have local bands to fill that time.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, like you said, fucking edit that motherfucker. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And I almost convinced my wife to watch it with me, and she saw the runtime. I was like,
really?
nah, I'm fucking out. Like, I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, fair enough. So since this is the first time anybody is hearing about this rating, so basically it's pretty self-explanatory. Poser is a movie that is the least punk. Punk I'm a Rocker is a movie that is solidly a punk movie, but you know, maybe not overtly, but it's still like pretty punk rock. And then Upper Crust is the punkest of movies. And because of kind of how sloppy it was and the fact that it was about a bunch of punk bands playing out in the middle of a cornfield, I'm going to go ahead and give it Upper Crust.
I'm going with Punk of Rock.
Okay.
Just because I feel like it could have been more punk rock.
Yeah,
It could have focused. Yeah, I mean, they could have talked more about actual crust bands for it to get the Upper Crust band line.
The crusty scene got nothing more than an honorable mention at the end.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I can't in good conscience give it Upper Crust when they didn't even talk about the crust bands that played there.
I was right on the fence between Punk America and Upper Crust. I am giving it Upper Crust because of how just chaotic the documentary in general is, and kind of how
that's fair. I mean, you
sloppily
almost
and
swayed
poorly
me.
it was.
You almost swayed me to
Yeah.
go ahead and bump it to Upper Crust, but I just can't do it. Our regular rating, since it's in the middle of the cornfield, we're going to rate it on corn cobs. And what is the scale there?
I think we decided on 18.
Out of how many? 18. That's
18.
a good number. That
18
makes
corn
sense.
18 corn cobs, and the reason I decided on 18, I'll get into it my end notes, but it's a personal story for me actually at the Outhouse, so that's why I chose 18. So how many corn cobs would you give it out of 18?
I am going to give it 8 corn cobs.
Damn.
Out of 18.
Wow. That's not good.
You know, it's less than half good.
Yeah.
For me. You know, I mean, I already talked about the problems I had with it. I probably like it more than 8 corn cobs. But for your average viewer, somebody off the street who wants to watch a movie, they're not going to like it that much.
Right.
They're going to see the runtime and not want to watch it. They're going to be like, "What the fuck are you talking about? A punk venue in the middle of a cornfield? That sounds weird."
Right.
You know, so I don't think it has broad appeal. Narrative choices that I think hold it back. Yeah. I don't think I'll ever watch it again. I've seen it 3 times now, and I don't have an interest in ever watching it again. 3
fucking times? Yeah, I don't think I'd ever watch it again.
I screened it for the film festival.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was like, "Oh, this is so much fun. This is great." And then it got into the film festival. Or if maybe it didn't actually get in the film festival. Maybe we screened it separately.
Yeah.
But we screened it at the Orpheum. So I went to it there and saw it at the Orpheum, which was fun. The Orpheum is an old theater in Wichita.
Do you want to shout out that film festival in case somebody doesn't know what film festival you're talking about?
Oh yeah, Tallgrass Film Festival. It's a film festival in Wichita. It's been going on for 23 years. I volunteered for the festival as a programmer from 2009 to 2020. So I watched around 250 films from February to August and helped in the selection process, and then introduced movies and hosted Q&As with filmmakers and stuff like that whole time. And The Outhouse is one of the movies that we did get to bring to town. Another punk rock. There's probably 6 punk rock movies that we did at the festival. The Other F Word is a pretty fun documentary about punk rock dads, which we can both relate to.
Yep. Yeah.
So yeah, there'll probably be a couple other films we review here from the Tallgrass Film Festival screening that I've done.
So my rating is going to be, I'm going to give it 10 out of 18 corn cobs. And I think mine's a little bit higher than yours because, probably because this is the first time I've ever seen it. And also I have personal experiences with the Outhouse, and I just enjoyed the walk down memory lane. I enjoyed the nostalgia trip.
Yeah.
So for that's my reasoning for 10 out of 18 corn cobs. Would you recommend this movie to people?
It depends. You know, if they're interested in punk rock, absolutely. If they're from Kansas and interested in punk rock, then they have to watch it. I don't know how you don't.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to like it or love it, but it will be probably a walk down memory lane for them just because of the time and place.
Right.
You know, so I mean, yeah, I would recommend it to punk rockers and people interested in it. I would have a hard time. I mean, I would tell people about it and, you know, let them decide. But I would have a hard time recommending it to just somebody off the street.
Yeah.
You know?
Same. Yeah, I would recommend it to any punk rocker, in particular punk rockers from the Midwest and from Kansas, the Kansas City and Lawrence scene more specifically. But honestly, I'd recommend it from any punk rocker that I ran into, just because, it's kind of one of those things of, you know, how does this measure up to the scene where you are? Like I'd be in the same way that I would be interested in if somebody had a documentary about a fucking punk venue in the middle of Kazakhstan. I'd be like, yeah, I want to watch that. Like, I don't even care if it's long and boring. I'd watch the shit out of that. I'm curious.
Right. Yeah. I will watch any documentary about a punk venue. The one in New Jersey that Jon Stewart used to work at.
Oh, no shit.
There's a documentary about that place I want to watch. I don't remember what it's called.
No, okay.
But I want to see that. You know, I love punk rock documentaries. So I'll watch it. I'll watch fucking any of them. There was a show on Epix, a 4-part series about the history of punk rock. It looks pretty bad, but I kind of want to watch it anyway. You know, I've read punk rock books. I think the first one I read was Please Kill Me, which, I mean, since that's what I read first when I was getting into punk rock and learning about the history of it, that's probably why I view America as the origins of punk rock, because, I mean, that's the framework of that book. You know, it talks a lot about the Detroit scene. Yeah. And then moving to New York. And then, you know, the Sex Pistols co-opting the culture to sell Malcolm McLaren's clothes. So I don't have that fondness for the Sex Pistols because, you know, my jumping off point was not the Sex Pistols. It was the American scene.
And I would argue, specifically, you're right. Like you were talking about, like Iggy Pop and
the Stooges, Velvet Underground,
MC5, all from Detroit. So I would argue, that the punk scene started specifically in Detroit, or around Michigan, and when I hear British people reference the Sex Pistols and how they started punk, I'd be like, don't you want to at least refer to like the Kinks or a good band from Britain? Like, if you use the Kinks, at least they're good and came out way before the Sex Pistols anyway.
Right. Well, even the Damned were doing stuff before the Sex Pistols. The Clash.
Right. Yeah. I'm absolutely.
Pretty sure we're doing shit before the Sex Pistols. The Sex Pistols made it fucking, quote unquote, scare quotes here, dangerous, because Sid Vicious was a fucking drug addict that murdered his girlfriend, and John Lydon is an edgy piece of shit. I mean, they were edgy assholes, and it made punk rock seem edgy. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, you know, that whole thing, like when Crass started the anarcho scene and punk became much more overtly political, you know, they said punk was dead because Sex Pistols were fucking bullshit, and they were mocking that aspect of punk rock because it was so fucking cheesy and so fucking stupid.
So, like I was saying earlier, the reason we came up with the 1 to 18 corn cobs was from my first experience at the Outhouse. So I walked outside of the venue to go piss in the cornfield. And when I came back, there was a big guy. He might have been a skinhead. I don't know. I was very intoxicated. And he was standing in the door, and he said, you got to be 18 to come in, which I don't think was true.
No, it wasn't true. It was all ages.
It was all ages. He said, you got to be 18 to come in. And I said, I am 18. And he said, no, you're not. And so it's like, okay, so I was 18 the first time I went, so it was 1 through 18 corn cobs. And then I started to walk away, and I ran into one of my friends, and he was like, where are you going? And I was like, the bouncer won't let me in. And he said, they don't have a bouncer. So
somebody gatekeeping.
Just some dude just standing there. I just looked like I was just some little. I was like super scrawny and shit at the time too. I was like this skinny little 18-year-old punk rock kid from Wichita. And by the time we walked back, he wasn't even there anymore. So we just fucking walked in.
That would have been right around the time it was almost over because it closed in 97.
97, yeah. So
98.
I think the first time I was there was in 96, and I think the second time I was there was 97. So okay. I was just right at the tail end, and I had, like I said earlier, I had no fucking idea that it was this legendary venue. I was just going to some show that people were dragging me to, and I was just another show in the middle of a fucking cornfield. Like not the first time I've been to one of those, in something that was just a cinder block kind of shack. Like it wasn't weird to me. It wasn't unique to me either. I didn't even remember I'd even been to the Outhouse until I started until I found out this was a documentary, and I started thinking about it, and I was like, oh my god, I was there. And the second time I went there, I just sat on my buddy's car and we just fucking drank, and then we left. When it was over, we could hear the band just fine.
We should probably mention what the Outhouse turned into. And do you know if it still exists in that form, or is
they have
what is it now?
Facebook page and a website.
Oh wow!
So I think it still exists. So it is a bring your own beer strip club. And I'm going to guess that it is mostly KU students who are there stripping. So
yeah, that's probably a safe bet.
Yeah, and I would imagine that they work only for tips. I doubt they get a paycheck. It would shock me if somebody's W-2 has the Outhouse on it. So I just want to end on this. We'll talk very briefly about the next movie review that we're going to do. But I do want to end our Outhouse documentary from another review. I'm gonna pull a quote from another review that was on the KJHK website by a contributor named Cami Coons. And she published this on March 23rd, 2021. And I think that I pulled this quote from her article, and I think it explains the documentary and the Outhouse so perfectly. So she says, The Outhouse, the film, 1985 to 1997, is not a perfect film, but neither was The Outhouse. It was unrefined, potentially lethal, and in the middle of nowhere. But it gave a whole bunch of weirdos a sense of belonging. All of this is evident in the film, and that's exactly what the fucking... Yeah. That's what the movie is. It's a bunch of fucking weirdos in a cornfield talking about a cinder block building, and it's absolute chaos. So for our next punk movie review, so we're probably only going to do these about once a month, just because of time constraints and our other podcasts we have going on. But for our next one, we're going to do a movie called Suburbia, and the reason we're going to do that one before we do Suburbia, which is a different movie entirely, is because everybody, and I don't know if this is your experience with it, so I saw both of them when I worked at the video store, and everybody kept saying, have you seen Suburbia? And I said, No, and they said, that's fucking nuts. You're a punk and you haven't seen Suburbia. You need to see it. So I found it at my video store. I found this little movie called Suburbia. And I thought, oh, fuck, I found it. Cool. It's a Richard Linklater film. And I rented it and watched it, and it was the most god-awful piece of shit I think I'd seen at the time. I barely got through it.
It was fucking Linklater.
It fucking is, yeah, man. It is. It's fucking terrible.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, we all got to start somewhere, I
He's
guess.
so hit and miss, man.
Yeah.
Like, Slackers.
Yeah.
And it's been over 20 years since I've seen Slackers, but I thought that movie was a piece of shit, too.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. But, yeah, he was a lot younger than, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, I agree. His movies are hit or miss. But yes,
I remember being pissed off at that movie because I thought it was Penelope Spheeris's Suburbia.
Yeah, yep, I thought it was too, and I watched it. So that's the reason that we're doing that one before Suburbia, because that's the one.
We just want to relive that anger, and we want you to experience it too.
Because we saw it first, because nobody knew the difference. So. It is technically titled slightly differently. It is Suburbia. They have it as, I think, 2 words. The U is capitalized in all the text.
Who knows why they made the decisions they made, but yeah,
right.
That's
probably
correct.
Because there already was a Suburbia, and they found out when they were trying to like get the film copyrighted, and they were like, oh fuck. So they just capitalized the U, made it 2 words, and we're like, okay, we're good. Yeah, so that movie is... and I'll put a little bit of the trailer at the end of this, just so you can hear the magic that is Suburbia. So Suburbia, it came out in 1996. It is the most Gen X thing I have ever seen, and that is not a compliment. And I am a member of Gen X, so I can say it. 5 teen friends spend their time hanging out behind a convenience store in a sleepy Texas town. Oh, fuck, I think this came out after Clerks, too, so way to rip off Kevin Smith there.
Yeah. 96 would have been after Clerks.
That was after Clerks,
Would have been after Mallrats.
Yeah, it was after Mallrats. You're right, yeah, so basically, I think Richard Linklater saw a Kevin Smith movie. He's like, oh, fuck, I should just do the exact same thing, but in Texas. So they spend their time hanging out behind a convenience store in a sleepy Texas town. Through pointless discussions, the group descends into self-perpetuating cycle of malaise. Their routine, however, breaks when Pony returns to town after finding success as a rock star, forcing the group to question their desire to stay in the suburbs doing nothing with their lives. It's just as bad as it sounds.
It is an unmitigated piece of shit film.
It has 68% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is generous.
That is a crime. That is a fucking crime.
63% on Metacritic and 6.7 out of 10 on IMDb? How?
What the fuck? I mean, it's gotta be because it's Linklater.
Right.
People are giving it a pass because his name is associated with it. This movie fucking sucks.
It does.
I don't know that there's any redeemable... I don't remember any redeemable qualities from it.
It's going to be... It's now, granted, I have not seen it since I worked at the video store in like 2002.
Right. I mean, I think we lived together.
Yeah.
I don't know. Still.
But yeah, I just... I can't imagine I would think it's any better now than I did 22 years ago or whenever the fuck I saw it.
I'm worried it's going to be worse.
I think it probably is. I watched the trailer for it, and it's painful. That is why I have to play the trailer for all of you listening, so you can share the magic. If you want to actually see, obviously this is just audio only, so if you want to actually just see the trailer, you can see it on YouTube. And the entire movie, I believe, is available on Tubi for free. That's Tubi.
Oh.
Yeah.
Great. It's a quality streaming platform.
It is. We all go to Tubi to watch our movies, right?
Fun fact, my wife and I often go to Tubi to watch just completely out-of-pocket fucking 80s high fantasy movies.
Yeah.
They've got some hilarious gems with, Dolph Lundgren and
nice
swords and sorceries and
like Masters of the Universe and shit.
Good journey.
Good journey.
They got like old D&D movies and shit.
Thanks everybody for listening to our first episode of Punk Movie Review. This episode is going to be along with our Prairie Punk House companion. So this episode's going to be free. It's going to be outside of the paywall because we wanted everybody who listens to Prairie Punk House companion, which is our niche podcast for mostly a Midwest audience, to hear this as well, because it just ties into that. Future Punk Movie Reviews will probably be behind a paywall, but I don't think we're not going to make it tiered. So if you come in at any tier on our Patreon, then you'll get access to it, even at the lowest tier.
I think it's like $1, right?
Yeah, I think it's like $1 for the lowest tier. And then we also have our coffee page, which is like our tip jar, basically. So if you like what we do, even $1 like it,
Yeah.
go ahead and give us a tip. Like Chair Bear said in other podcasts, we're not looking to quit our day jobs or anything, but it would be nice to recoup expenses of having a domain and having an RSS feed and all that stuff, and having to purchase things like microphones and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So every little bit helps. And like I've said in the past too, if you can't contribute financially, and if you can't, then please don't.
Right.
You can contribute in other ways. You can contribute by spreading the word, giving us those clicks. Yep.
Sharing.
Share.
Reviewing.
Right. Yep. And
emailing us.
Yeah.
Telling us stories. Send us pictures.
Yeah, send us pictures of flyers, patches, art, old pictures of punk shows.
Most importantly, me. Pictures of me.
Pictures of you.
Not current pictures. I don't need current pictures of me. Old pictures of me.
If you can find a picture of me, then send that too. I always tried to hide. I always ran when I saw cameras. So I wasn't in as many pictures. I was not a fan of being in front of the camera. But if you do happen to have a picture of me, then cool. Yeah, send it our way. Be awesome.
Sarah has a shit ton of pictures. I know she does.
Thanks everybody for listening. And yeah, please also listen to our regular podcast, which we'll have another one coming out next week. So thanks everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Nothing ever changes, man. 50 years from now, we're all gonna be dead, and there'll be new people standing here, drinking beer, eating pizza, bitching and moaning about the price of Oreos, and they won't even know we were ever here.
Yo, you're getting me all upset here.
I mean, look at us. Are we all dressed the same?
Eating the yogurt.
We all talk the same.
Checking the voicemail.
We all watch the same TV.
Shaving the bikini line. Sometimes I just want something different, you know?
Pony's coming here to the corner?
Pony? What's a pony? You mean the geek who played the folk music at the senior prom?
Yes!
Well, you wanted to get together with your close friend Pony the Rockstar, I understand.
The corner. I mean, nothing's changed.
Didn't you see that video on MTV?
Oh, I shot my TV.
You still living at your mom's?
He's rich and he's famous. He's got everything and you've got nothing.
Great concert tonight!
Oh, you were there?
No.
I don't need a limousine to know who I am, all right?
Right on. You know what? He doesn't need the limo, man.
I don't have an answer. I don't have a message.
Okay, great. Well, now he's crying.
'Cause I'm not like everybody else. No, I'm not like everybody else.
It's this tar pit of stupidity that we're all stuck in.
Put back the leprechaun.
Go! Top of the world, Ma!
You don't belong here.
No, you don't belong here. We were here before you.
What are we doing, Jeff? You and me.
I'm moving out to LA.
Oh, that's nice. They have many convenience stores there for you to stand in front of.
Like everybody